There's no turning back.
So what exactly are those illusions? Planet of the Humans, directed by Jeff Gibbs and executive produced by Michael Moore, pulls back this curtain of corporate interests controlling the mainstream environmental movement.
Specifically, the film says that green technologies like solar and wind, which preserve a way of life but do not preserve the planet. We are joined now via Skype by producer Ozzie Zahner, Academy Award-winning filmmaker and executive producer Michael Moore, and director Jeff Gibbs. Gentlemen, we're glad to have all three of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great to see you guys.
Ozzie, let me start with you. First of all, the film's been very controversial. We're going to get to that in a moment. But what was the message that you wanted to send here?
Well, you were saying the film is controversial. I think the existing environmental movement is going to be the last to come around to the story in this film. They'll continue to argue that solar cells and wind turbines are going to become more efficient, cheaper, these sorts of things. What they miss is that it doesn't really matter. These are based on technological processes. They require fossil fuels for their construction. It hasn't worked after spending $1 trillion. We're no better off. In fact, we're much worse off than we were when we started this 30 years ago. And just this brief virus period in 1 week has done more than the environmental movement has done in 30 years to reduce consumption. And so that should give us the first hint that we've been on the wrong track and we need to switch.
Very interesting. Jeff, I want to go to you as well. I mean, we've seen a letter circulated by Josh Fox, who seems to be one of the chief antagonists of the film. He says, quote, "The film touts blatantly untrue fossil fuel industry talking points, deceitfully misleading its audience on renewable energy, and disparages and attacks important climate leaders." Jeff, what's your response to that?
Yeah, thank you. Wow, we went to great pains to show you what was happening actually in the field with solar and wind. And many of our experts are actually people in the solar and wind industry that we went to verify what we were saying. We actually filmed a lot of the interviews at a solar expo. And we don't attack any environmental leaders. We need our environmental leaders. We just are in the wrong story. So most of the film shows you, in their own words, what they're advocating for and what they're doing. So we're the opposite of from the fossil fuel industry. We're from our own side, asking questions about what we say is going to save the world. And I think it should be permitted to have discussions, among ourselves, among the people who believe in climate change, that know that the environment's in trouble, about what's going to work and what's not going to work. And that was our intent, to trigger a discussion and to raise a lot of questions. We don't have all the answers, but we want to have a discussion about, this is so much bigger than climate change. We've eaten 90% of the fish in the ocean. Half of the wildlife have disappeared in the last 40 years, primarily because of expanding logging and agriculture. Fossil fuels is tragic, but there's a lot more to our damaging the planet than just climate change. And so I wanted to spark a holistic discussion about all the things we humans are doing, and about whether these green technologies were even going to solve climate change, let alone all of these other things that are happening around the planet. And I think looking at ourselves as a single species that's got this addiction to growth, my theory is that infinite growth on a finite planet is called suicide, and that's what we have to address.
Michael, speak to that piece, the addiction to growth, because, part of why you've been, candidly so influential in my thinking is you've had this capitalist critique that really opened my eyes in a lot of ways. And it seems to me like that's kind of a core piece of this film as well. So just speak to that part.
Well, let's just look at our system, our economic system. It requires Wall Street, let's just put it out there. Wall Street requires that every business grow from year to year. If a business does really well this year, it's not good enough that they do the same thing next year. They have to do more, which means we have to consume more, buy more, we have to make bigger profits. And when we have a system based on profit as opposed to need, the actual, what do we really need? What do each of us really need? And what we've signed up for by agreeing to this economic system that we have in our country is that we're supposed to need more. This has and is killing this planet. And we never stop to say, do we have enough? When is enough enough? Actually, I think the word enough is the dirtiest word in capitalism. Because there's not supposed to be any such thing as enough. But because we are told we need more, and companies are punished by Wall Street if they don't do more and grow more. Growth is really the death of us. And we've been saddened over the years. We started really thinking about this film over a decade ago because we saw that this evil economic system that we have is based on greed, and we saw some of our environmental groups hopping into bed with corporate America, and you've seen this happen over the last decade. How they all have gone green. Oh, they all tout the big green thing, and they saw basically that enough of us believed in green because we want to live. We want this planet to live, and so they saw, wow, there's the supply and demand right there. The demand is for green. Let's give them green and let's make a lot of money off it.
Certainly.
I think the failure of the movement has been to address this serious flaw, which is we are not going to save the planet or ourselves by allowing Wall Street, hedge funds, corporate America to be anywhere near us as we try to fix this. We are in desperate shape. Our environmental leaders told us a decade ago, if we went past 350 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, that was it. That's the limit. We were done. We would not be able to reverse it. We wouldn't be able to turn it back. So where are we at today? We're at 410, 420 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. We're way beyond over. And unless somebody sounds the warning siren, and that's what we're trying to do with this film, we're never going to make it at this point. And so, as critical as we are of some people in the environmental movement or some organizations, the real point here is that it's only your friends that can tell you when you're messing up, when you're doing wrong. And we are the environmental movement, because we've been involved in it since Jeff and I, since the first Earth Day. Mm-hmm. Sorry to date us here, but we are lifelong environmentalists. And if we can't say to each other, hey, look, we might be on the wrong path here because we're not winning this battle. Everybody knows it. Everybody watching this knows. Are we winning the battle against the climate emergency that we're in the middle of? No. So if we're not winning, why don't we have the discussion about what we need to do? Because it cannot go on any longer.
Right. And so, Michael and Jeff, picking up on those points, Ozzy, I want to get you in here, which is that a critique of growth and talking about growth could lead some to surmise that you're saying that we don't need any more growth, or it could even lead to the idea that we need to restrict our populations, our growth in many of these things. Is that something that the film is suggesting? Just help me, Ozzy, think through the implications of the film and its critique of growth as a species and economically.
Our basic conception of economic growth is flawed in a big way, and the reason is because actually as we grow, as our human presence grows, there is less natural material available for us to live on. So actually growth means that there is a reduction in natural material per capita worldwide as more and more people consume more and more. What we need is a rethinking of that system, trying to think, how do we come back to a level where everyone can have what they need in order to survive, which people don't have currently, and also be in line with the long-term viability of the planet that we live on.
Mm-hmm. And so, Jeff, let's just get you in on that question as well. I mean, it sounds a bit Malthusian, some of what you're suggesting here. Is that an inaccurate characterization? What's your response to that?
Absolutely. We never use the word population control. We're not in favor of population control. Mm-hmm. We merely point out, as there was a UN study that came out 1 or 2 years ago, that just points out that the doubling of our human numbers and the quadrupling of our human economy is the prime driver of extinction on this planet. Is the UN favoring, population control. No, many scientists are pointing out the obvious, but you don't read about that much in the press anymore because it's all only focused on climate change, which again is a terrible, terrible issue. But I think we have enough on this planet and this economy to take care of everyone. And right now we're learning that the 3 times when climate change and fossil fuel use went down, were during this pandemic, the days after 9/11, and during the Great Recession. Now, we're just raising the question. We've got to come to terms with this expansion. We don't have the answers in the film, but it is our growth, and especially our growth in consumption, driven by capitalism, that's driving this beast. So,
yeah. And Michael, let me ask you, because some of the activists who have critiqued the film are people that I like, that I think are acting in good faith, people like Josh Fox, people like Michael Mann. And I think the core of their concern is this idea that if you make the problem so big, if you make it such that, look, we really can't address the problem without sort of fundamentally restructuring everything, then it, in a sense, plays into the hands of the fossil fuel industry, who sort of want people to just throw up their hands and go, the problem's too big, let's just keep doing what we're doing. Is that a valid concern? Is that something that you grapple with?
No, it's dangerous, actually. What they want us to do is tone this thing down, tamp it down, so that people don't become too overwhelmed. We can't just change overnight. Well, as Jeff just said, we have changed overnight, haven't we, in the last month? We are able to make serious fundamental changes in the way we live immediately if we think we're going to die. And that has forced the majority of people to say, I will do what needs to be done in order to live right now. This pandemic, this should teach us a lot about where we have failed when it comes to battling the climate emergency that we're in the middle of. Does anybody watching this think that, well, if we just get through this pandemic, that'll be the last of this? There won't be any more pandemics. The Mother Nature is sending us a huge, huge warning. Mother Nature has sent us to our timeout rooms right now. And we're supposed to spend this time thinking about how have we messed things up so bad that in this particular case, this virus leapt from a species that had been abused by humans, and now we are suffering from this. We're the ones in the cages, not the bats in China. We're the ones, I hope, being forced to think about this. And I think what you said, Crystal, is I understand, and let's make this clear. We have huge admiration for all of our fellow environmentalists and people that have worked so hard in the last 5 decades to fix this problem. The problem is it isn't fixed. And all of us, when we don't accomplish what we need to accomplish in our lives, aren't we supposed to be somewhat self-reflective, somewhat self-critical, and say, okay, this doesn't seem to be working. What do we need to do to change this? And I know they don't want people to freak out, so they don't want to tell them the real truths of what is happening. But I have seen this from my own reporting and on my podcast. I've talked a lot about how people are not being told the whole truth from the beginning. And back in the end of February, beginning of March, I started saying what I knew to be true from my sources, that this is a 2-year pandemic. That's the first thing I heard from my source at the NIH.
Wow.
This is a 2-year pandemic. Nobody wants to hear that. Everybody wants to hear, we're all going outside in June. It's all over. It's not over. It's not anywhere near over. The 6 feet we were told to stay from each other, it's really, if you really talk to scientists who are deeply involved, but they don't know how to message this, it's more like 13 feet. The coronavirus, it can travel farther than what they told us at the beginning. At the beginning, remember, they just said, stay away from people that are coughing and sneezing. Well, that's gone. They've had to change their story a number of times. And I think from the beginning it would have been better people don't want to be kept in the dark. They want transparency. They want the truth. And I think that all of us in the environmental movement need to talk to each other. We hope this film, we wanted to ignite a discussion. That has happened. There's a lot of people in the environmental movement, a lot of our fellow environmentalists that have seriously praised this film and thank Jeff for having the courage to to give us the awful truth that we don't want to hear. We don't have any more time, though, to keep going down roads that aren't taking us to this place where we are climate change, whatever that is you want. It's not really climate change anymore. We're way beyond change. We're in serious trouble. What we've all been doing hasn't worked. Now we need to talk about what will work instead of certain people in the environmental movement or certain organizations that decided to hook up with corporate America, with Wall Street. Let's try to get them to go green. Let's work with them. There's no working with the devil here. And we, the people, hold the power. We need to exercise that power. We need to demand that this issue is on the agenda in this election year, and we need to have candidates acknowledging this and ringing that warning bell loud and clear.
Well, and I can tell you one thing we very much believe in the show is that people are adults. They can handle the truth. They deserve the truth. Certainly. And so we would recommend to our audience, you check the film out and decide for yourself. And really quick, Jeff, where can they find the film? Where can they watch it?
On YouTube, on Rumble Media, or on our website, planetofthehumans.com.
Great.
Well, congrats on the film, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
gentlemen.
you all so much for joining us. Really interesting interview. Thank you.
Appreciate you
Thank
all.
you.
Guys, thanks for talking to us. And the movie's free, everybody, so please watch it.
There you go.
There you go. You got no excuses.
All right. Next on Rising, Nancy Pelosi says she's open to the idea of a minimum guaranteed income and has thanks MSNBC for their, quote, objective coverage. That was interesting. Our thoughts when Rising continues.